Okay, girls and boys, get your thinking caps on. It's the third book in the Throne of Glass series, Heir of Fire. Bet you thought that I wasn't going to come. No one was thinking that. But bet you thought that I'd forgotten about it. I hadn't forgotten about it. I'd read it. I've read other books since, but I just hadn't got round to making this video. So I'm going to do it now. So, Heir of Fire, if you don't know what's happened in Throne of Glass and Crown of Midnight, which is the second one, then you can watch those videos, I guess. Maybe I'll put the little thing where you can find them. I don't know. And I have opted to read the prequel book fourth, so after this. I have already read it, so I already know what happens. That's a separate video, won't go too much into it. Let's hop right into Heir of Fire because she's a chunky book. I don't know where she is. She's up there. She's quite chunky. I can't remember how many pages off the top of my head, but let's just say I was invested and I kind of wanted to go on to Queen of Shadows immediately after reading this one. However, I told myself I was going to read the prequel fourth, and you kind of need to read the prequel before you read Queen of Shadows. So, or that's like the best place to read it. So that's what was happening with that. So let's get into it. Heir of Fire is split into like two parts, but I'll get to that when we get to that. So at the end of Crown of Midnight, which is the second book, the King of Ardal, whatever, sends Selena to Wendelin, which is this like big country on the other side of the map that you can see, and she's supposed to basically assassinate the royal family. But we also find out at the end of Crown of Midnight, obviously this is spoilers, guys, so why are you here if you don't care, if you don't want to spoiler, because this is not the video for you. Bye bye. But we find out that Selena is actually Aelin Ashvaya Galanthininis. Don't know how to say any of these names, but she's basically the lost queen of Terrasim, and so basically she's being sent back to her own country, her own motherland. And so yeah, part one of the book is called Heir of Ash, and this is where Selena is in Wendelin, and she's like basically not doing anything. She's procrastinating. She's been sent there to kill the royal family, but she's not going to do that because they're Ashvires and she's technically an Ashvire, so she's like, no thanks. And also the current crown prince, Galen, is too good and too peaceful for her to do that. So instead she decides that she needs to make contact with her Fae Queen aunt Maeve, who is the sister of her great grandmother. So there was three sisters, Maeve, Mab and Mora. I believe Mab was Selena's great grandmother, and then Maeve and Mora are the sisters. She's basically going to speak to Maeve because she needs to find out more about the word keys, and she's like, the Fae Queen will know, because if you didn't realise, which you should have realised, but when we find out that Selena is Aelin, that also means she's Fae, if you hadn't already clocked from that. But anyway, then she meets Rowan Whitethorn, and he's a prince from Mora's line, so basically he's kind of like Aelin's like third or fourth cousin, I don't know, but they're related. And he travels south with her to go to Maeve's lands where magic still exists because the King of Arden has not taken over all of that. And then we're back in the castle. Now, this is the bit that I'm struggling with, so I'm not surprised that they're struggling with, but Cole is struggling because Cole, however you say his name, is struggling because he's found, like, he clocks at the end of Crown of Midnight, once the king has already decided that Selena needs to go to Wendelin, that she's actually the Queen of Terrasin, and he's like, oh, what the hell? But also, he doesn't know what to do because he's also refusing to help Dorian, because now he knows that Dorian has magic, so he's like, oh, like, we're not really friends anymore, but also, like, how can I protect you? Which, that kind of friendship really confuses me, because it's like, bro, just be friends. I don't get it. Like, you only gave up your title and everything to come here for him, and now, listen, I can't even. I literally can't even. And also, how hypocritical is it that the King of Ardland doesn't want anyone to have magic, but then is using magic himself? And of course he should let his son have magic. I don't know. The whole thing is a bit confusing to me, to be honest. But anyway. So we've got all of that. And then we've also got in Ardalan, Aidan Ashvire, also Aelin's cousin, and he has also been appointed the king's northern general. He arrives and Chow, Cole, whatever, and Dorian don't like him. They've never had good interaction. And Aiden comes in and he's like this whole like rascal, like bad boy behavior. And he just thinks he's so cool. But he has the same eyes as Selena, and Cole sees that immediately. I can't remember if Dorian sees that, but Cole 100%. And then we're switching to another perspective. Now this is a completely new perspective, but we meet Manon Blackbeak, who is the heir of the Blackbeak Iron Teeth Witch clan, and she's the leader of this group called the 13, who are like the best of the Blackbeak clan. And Blackbeak clan, that is clan, that's a tongue twister. Anyway, she's hunting around for Crochan witches. So if you don't remember, or I'm not even sure if it's mentioned, but essentially there's a country in the west of Ardalan where the Cochrane witches used to rule, but the Iron Teeth killed them and took over. However, the last Cochrane queen basically cast a curse on those lands, making it the Western Wastes. So basically, they all hate each other. But Manon is then hunted by some villagers and she kills them all. Obviously, she's Iron Teeth, whatever. I don't know if she's actually got Iron Teeth. I think they do. I just think that if they adapt that into a TV show or a movie, like, how are you supposed to show that? Anyway, whatever. CGI is crazy. Anyway, back to Selena and Rowan. So Selena and Rowan are traveling. They have this like little like banter back and forth with each other, which basically makes it like they hate each other. But Selena spots the little folk, and they're like all these fairies, and they're not allowed to light a fire because apparently the forest is full of dangerous things. And Rowan's like, don't be stupid and light a fire. Back in Ardalan, this is the thing, going between all three different places is really confusing to my brain, and at one point I was like, oh my god, they need to split this into different books because I'm just getting confused. And I was more invested in certain people's parts of the story at certain times. Anyway, I feel like the more I talk, the longer this video is going to be. This whole video is about talking, but anyway. Dorian has to entertain Aiden because like his dad's told him to, but then Aiden pushes into a rose bush. I don't really get that whole, but I think it's like trying to show like that we don't like you thing to each other. And then Dorian goes to get his hand checked by a healer, and that's where he meets Saoirse, who's a healer from Fenro, who's been healing him and Selena and Cal for months when they got in trouble, but she doesn't actually tell anybody, which is what like shocks him about her, because he's like, oh, like, why is she not telling? Because clearly all of us are getting injured in ways that we shouldn't be getting injured if we didn't have magic. Anyway, but we also find out that Saoirse has a crush on Dorian. Of course, he's a flipping prince. Selena and Rowan arrive. Selena and Rowan arrive at a fortress on the border of Wendelin and Maeve's Feylands, where the Demi-Fey live. So it's like the half-blooded people, which is technically what I was going to call her Fair. I'm now getting books confused. What Aelin, Selena, her names are getting confusing now, live. But the Fae are not accepted enough to enter Maeve City, which is Doranau. So Maeve is like Aelin, which also Selena hates being called that, and Ruth like says that's not my name. But then Selena learns that her mom tried to keep her away from Maeve like all these years ago. And then Maeve tells Selena that if she wants answers to the word key, she has to come and get them in Dornell, but she can only get to Dornell if she can use her magic. So then she has to stay in the fortress and train with Rowan, who hates her, and work in the kitchens, and it's basically like slave trade. Anyway, back to Manon. Manon's grandmother is the matron of the Blackbeaks, and her grandmother is talking to Duke Perrington, who's travelling with all the prison wagons, and probably has Caitlin with him, and Roland maybe. The witches get an offer from the king that they may be in his army for a few years and then they can get their country back essentially, but what they have to do is train in the mountain with wyvern. Yes, wyvern are like actual thing. I didn't realise they were an actual thing. I thought they were a make-up thing, but yeah, wyvern, kind of dragon-like but not dragons, I guess. I don't really know. Anyway, then Carl's men go missing because they're attending parties that Aiden is throwing. So Cole goes to and get them and be like, why are you not on duty? Anyway, then Selena goes off to work in the kitchens, and then that's when we get introduced to two new characters, which are Emrys and Luca, the old cook and his help. And at that time she calls herself Elentia because that's what Naomi used to call her, and then she finds out how the Fae look down on the Demi-Fae, and that's why they're not allowed to enter Dornell ever. Back to the witches. See, this is what I mean, it's getting very confusing. I feel like perhaps I should have split up the story to show you, like, this is what happens with Selena, this is what happens with Cole and Dorian, and this is what happened with the witches. But anyway, and then the back to where am I? No, back to the witches. Sorry, they all hate each other. The three clans. So you've got the the yellow legs, the black beaks, the blue, whatever, the blue bloods. I don't even remember, but they all hate each other. But they hold a memorial service for Baba Yellowlegs, and then the witches go from the Omega Mountains to the Northern Fang, and that's where this gap is that they have to cross with the Wyvern to prove that they can lead this army. And then Selena goes for her first training sessions with Rowan, and they go to this like a weird abandoned place, and he basically is like, yo, just shift to Faye, and she's like, listen sis, it's hard, like I can't just be doing that. He calls her a coward. That's exactly what Naima had called her, so Selena's like losing her lid and all that, but she refuses to train. And Rowan's like, well, here's this empty field, and there's like these weird things there, I can't remember what they're called, and they're waiting to hunt her, and she has to cross it, and if she does it successfully, she can go to Dornell basically immediately. But then something goes wrong, because instead of those like weird creatures being there, Selena meets another type of creature, who is like this, supposed to be like this beautiful man, and he makes her relive these like her most horrible memories, and she's having a breakdown. And then Rowan saves her, but she's had like some mental shift at that point. Then Cal meets with his father, who tells him he has 2 months before he has to come back to Aniel, because at the end of Crown of Midnight he makes a deal that they need to get Selena, who he didn't realise at the time was Aelin, out of the city and go to Wendelin or whatever, and he'll get his position back in Aniel. And so his dad's like, you got to come back. Dorian has been sparring and got another injury, so he meets with Saoirse and asks her where she came from, and she basically tells him that it's Fen Harrow, a small town, her parents were murdered, etc, etc. He's interested in her, of course. And then the witches go for their first ride on the Wyvern. Manon runs into the Yellowlegs heir, so Manon is the heir to the Blackbeaks, but Iskra is the heir to the Yellowlegs, and she's like a huge, basically. And then the 13 get on the Wyvern and they have great training session. And now the witches are all going to start training to see which clan is going to lead all the others, which is going to be determined by these war games afterwards. And then we find out later that Manon's grandmother tells her that she wants Manon to become the wing leader. Obviously, everybody wants their heir to be the wing leader, that you're not special queen. And then Selena is like really, really miserable because she's like working in the kitchen. And then we meet another character who's Emrys's mate, who's a Malachi. And then Faye, when they mate for life, and they're like primal. In the evening, she goes to get some food and she sees Demi-Fae in the kitchen, and Emrys is a storyteller, so he's telling old stories. They ask Selena to tell a story. She's like, no, I don't want to. Dorian goes to see Saoirse again, and she admits that she knows about all their adventures, but she would never tell anyone. Dorian gets scared and his magic erupts, and then Saoirse takes the blame for ruining all of her potions, and she promises that she's going to help him to get all of his magic under control. And then Cole is trying to trail Aiden at his own party, but Aiden isn't even there. So then he trails him outside until he gets captured, and then he's held hostage by a lord from Terrasen and his grandfather. So just remember Ren and Myrtle, just remember those. But Aiden is also there, and Cole tells him that he's being controlled by the king because of those, those black rings that they're wearing. But Aiden says that his ring is actually fake because he has Fae senses, and he was told not to trust what the Fae senses were like, don't trust that ring. But before they kill him, Cole tells them that Aelin is still alive, and Aiden, who has only been the general for the king, to not let his people get slaughtered, decides to make a deal with him for information about the magic that he has learned. He wants more information about Aelin because Aelin is his cousin. So basically he's been faking the whole time that he's on the king's side. Unsurprising. Rowan is trying to get Aelin to like shift into her Fae form, and eventually he does. Does he? No, he doesn't. Eventually I think he just like, anyway, things just start getting weird. Like he starts biting her and stuff, and then she's like lashing out on him, and then she basically flees and goes into the forest, but then she gets chased by these things called skinwalkers, that are these evil creatures, and then Rowan has to come to save her and forces her to shift because otherwise they will die. So basically she needs flight or flight response. They outrun the skinwalkers, and then out of panic, and to protect Rowan, she sets them on fire. So that's her power. The witches finally get to choose their wyvern, and Manon wants Titus, who's this big giant thing, but Iskra also wants him. And then Manon is pushed into the pit by Iskra, and when Titus is out that time, Manon tries to escape, but Titus is obviously a wyvern, he's very vicious. However, they have been using these bait beasts, which are like just bait for the wyvern, but the bait beast helps her, and so she's like, I want that bait beast to be my wyvern. And everyone's like, sis, are you sure? And then her grandma's really angry too, because she's like, you've picked a bait beast, who she names Aberox, by the way, but it's like, if you're going to be the wing leader, like, no one's going to take you seriously. Listen, I can't lie, the grandma was doing too much for me. I really didn't like her. And then Carl and Adrian meet in secret. Dorian finds them and hears them talking about Selena/Aelin, and he didn't actually know about that. And then Cole tries to explain that he's trying to keep Dorian safe, but Dorian's like, I hate you. See, this is what I mean, their relationship is so flipping conflicting, I cannot. And then Aiden decides to raise a court for the precious Aelin, and what a great time. We already knew he was always going to be on her side. And then Selena and Rowan train in the ruins of a temple for Marla, and they talk about like how horrible Maeve is, and that Maeve wouldn't send help to Terrason when they were getting attacked. And then they go to investigate a body that has been found, but it doesn't have any wounds, it's just drained of all of its life, but it's like a weird smell. And then Cole and Aiden meet again, but this time in Selena's apartment that she left to Cole at the end of Crown of Midnight, which she bought when she escaped from a Robin Hamill. Stay tuned for the Assassin's Blade recap. Aiden tells him that the day magic disappeared in Terrason, and that there was 2 waves, one from the west and one from the southwest. Also, at the same time, Saoirse has figured out that putting more iron in Dorian's blood would keep his magic contained, because iron beats magic. And it turns out that her theory works, and then Dorian kisses her, Saoirse runs away. If that is not a rejection, I don't know. It's not a rejection. But that's how I would read it. Anyway, Manon doesn't want any of the humans around Aberox because he keeps getting scared of them, and she gets all of Aberox's broken teeth and spikes replaced by iron ones like hers, so they do have iron teeth. But the only problem is that his wings are not ready for flying. In Wendelin, another body is found, so Rowan and Selena go to the human village to ask around, but obviously they won't help them because Fae don't have the best reputation of being like the most pleasant people. And then when Selena starts spending money because she is a shopaholic, do not remember that, also stay tuned for Assassin's Blade. Selena has a flashback to her youth when, oh, did I say she shifted? She's shifted now, but anyway, she has a flashback to her youth when her mother used to call her Fireheart, and that's when she remembers a conversation between her parents about her hiding Aelin's magic from Maeve and sending her off to a magic school to control her powers, because she almost once accidentally burned down the library. And Aiden was always by her side, faithful cousin, of course. across the country, Saoirse realizes that she's ready to risk everything and goes back to Chris Story, and that was a wasted chapter in my opinion, but whatever. Cole and Adrian go to meet Myrtle and Ren. Ren is attacked by a different group of soldiers, because Cole doesn't know them and he's supposed to be the captain of the King's Guard, so he's like, I don't know who they are. They hide in an opium den while the men hunt them and manage to escape, but obviously it's very dangerous and very precarious. And then it turns out that Myrtle and Ren have no home in Rifthold and they've been living it rough, so Cal lets them stay in Selena's apartment. Myrtle then explains with the information that he has gathered that there are like 3 points across the continent, from the frozen waste to the deserted peninsula to Rifthold, and it's like a triangle of magic where magic has disappeared. So basically they're trying to say that must be like where the word keys are, because it's like that's what's containing the magic. Anyway, Manon tries to train Aberox, but he's not great, and he's very stubborn, and then she realizes that the meat that the wyvern eat is like really horrible, and so she decides to take him hunting. And then she's trying to teach him to fly, but he's obviously an anxious little beast and falls off the cliff. However, he saves them and they're fine. During one of the story times back with Selena starts asking questions about Maeve to learn more about her aunt, and then a Fae warrior and a friend of Rowan, so there's 5 of them basically, there's 5 warrior friends who all work for Maeve. His name is Gabriel. He arrives at the fortress. Selena goes to see what they're doing, and Rowan is tattooing things onto Gabriel's body. She tells him how she has no one left, but he gets angry and sends her away. Anyway, so she's angry, so she decides to lash out at Emrys, Malachi and Luca and walks out alone. Emrys tells Rowan that he is not a nice person for pushing her away like that, and explains that Selena's mother, Evelyn, has worked in the kitchen with him 25 years ago, and that he knew that she was ailing as soon as he saw her. And then Selena wanders off into the forest and admits that she's been lost for the last 10 years, since her parents passed away or were killed, whatever. They haven't told us at this point, but we can figure as much. Rowan makes it up to her and he gets her to do like different training exercise, but it's not a great one because he basically ties Luca to a chair in the middle of this frozen lake, and she has to save him without letting him drown. She does, but then they find that there's actually this giant monster that's inside the cave, so Rowan throws a sword that he finds at Selena and they just about escape. She also finds a ring in the sword, and when they get back to the fortress, Emrys tells them that there's a story of a wounded man who came across the creature and learned that it was kept in that cave by the warrior who had a sword and a ring. Selena gets angry at Rowan for putting Luca in danger because it takes her back to like everything that happened with Naima, and like how Naima basically orchestrated her own death to like trigger all these events, and she accidentally burns his wrist with her magic when she's fighting with him, so then she has to bring him some medication afterwards. Then Rowan tells Selena, they're all opening up, very vulnerable moment here, about his mate, a woman who was pregnant while he was off fighting, and he has been broken ever since. And now Rowan understands Selena more because they've been all this vulnerableness, and they're going to get each other out of darkness because they're both in darkness. And that is the end of part 1, Heir of Ash, and then there's a part 2, Heir of Fire. I feel like it's going to have to be a separate video because this is getting very, very long. So see you in the next one. Okay, bye.